Good evening. This is Sergei Medvedev. Today, the headlines. The lower chamber of the parliament approved the draft of the Union Treaty. The heads of the republics declared they were not prepared for a quick freeing up of Russian prices. The Afghan opposition has agreed to have negotiations with Russia, and we're having negotiations on the Middle East in Washington. The last hostage has been freed, and the American hostage, and an unusual show in Krylatskaya. The disintegration of the USSR has overstepped the bounds of rationality and had become destructive in nature. These and other arguments of Mr. Gorbachev could be heard at the meeting with the parliamentarians, and they were effective. The lower chamber today approved the draft of the Union Treaty. Virtually each speech was a condemnation of the Union Treaty. It's very far from perfection, but we have to stop before falling into this abyss. There is no other alternative right now. I think that the speech of Gorbachev before the parliamentarians of the republics is still too gentle in describing the future which awaits us when the euphoria stops over independence. The future is very terrible if the Union Treaty is not signed. What's going to happen if the treaty is not signed? What will happen then? Well, if there's no such Union Treaty, I think that there will be an agreement on economic cooperation. And all the republics which declared their independence will be searching paths for independently resolving their own problems. Nevertheless, taking into consideration the national problems, the conflicts between the republics, I think that some political union is necessary. The chamber approved the draft, but made certain amendments, which would be handed over to which should be sent on to the parliaments of the sovereign states. Today is the 50th anniversary of the battles around Moscow. Remember the days when people were united in the face of danger. In spite of the lengthy political dialogue between the former members of the Union, we're having more realistic or precise economic debates. Today, the members of the economic entity have agreed on tax policy, but economic reforms have become more complex. Many republics have declared that they will not be prepared for the liberalization of prices in Russia on the 16th of December. The most important decisions are perhaps being taken here, but it is perhaps interesting to look behind the scenes and see an intense amount of work on the part of experts and journalists. I think that the smaller republics are playing a certain role, whereas the larger republics formerly were very lofty in tone. The smaller republics have often played the role of mediators. This is a representative of Latvia, Mrs. Ivolgina. We were very interested in the speech of Mr. Gaidar, and I have informed our Prime Minister and our government. This is Mr. Fokin from the Ukraine, the Minister of the Ukraine. He says our economies are so integrated and are so firmly established over the decades that it would be foolish to think about autonomous functioning of any of the individual republics. I think that we have a status here for a new status and grounds for signing the Union Treaty. The heads of state, this is Mr. Kulik, who is from the Intergovernmental Committee. He says the foreign debt has been established by an international commission and a special committee, and the problem, which has been discussed for months, is now being solved. The individual republics are very concerned that might be left behind and find themselves in a difficult position, but Russia, might not having the support of the republics, might find itself in a very complex situation. The Parliament of the Union, agreeing after approving the Union Treaty, have agreed that there is a danger of war and poverty, but the promise of sovereignty is everywhere heard. Kravchuk has been elected president of the Ukraine, and tomorrow he will have the formal swearing in. Tomorrow, residents of the cities will be expressing opinions as to how life should go. How should an independent Ukraine structure its affairs? How do you see the structure of affairs? This is a member of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. I think this is Mr. Sitnik. I think that we are going to begin a period of stabilization. We have the two presidents of the Ukraine and Russia, and I think that we should put a stop to this decline. Subsequently, we will be exchanging students, professors, goods, machinery, and we will have a wonderful life in these individual sovereign states. The point of view of the Ukrainian academician is typical of the Ukraine, but in Russia, which is next door, there's concern for the future, and people are not optimistic over the fact that the payment of salaries, of the so-called 13th salary, the bonus will be delayed considerably. Also, there's a lot of talk about the liberalization of prices, but even so, many prices are being freed up even now, and that's particularly noticeable in Moscow. The food crisis in Moscow should become very severe in the next 10 or 15 days. Food deliveries to Moscow have virtually stopped. There are negotiations here between Yeltsin and Gorbachev. There's a lot of hope for import. There's very strict control at the train stations with regard to foodstuffs being sent out of the country. The major cities of Russia are all in the same situation, but they all have different ways out. Here is what is being done in the City Council of St. Petersburg. The deputies adopted two measures on food and also on privatization of apartments. Apartments will be given free to the people, but only 12 meters per person and an additional 18 per family. But after that, they'll have to pay depending on area and quality of apartment. There will also be there's 10 meters extra for invalids and or veterans. As for food, it's been decided to create a number of soup kitchens. When the City Council was finishing its meeting, we see here the unloading of food. This is the ship Kommunarsk, which is arrived from Germany with a load of potatoes. We see here not only civilian ships, but also auxiliary military ships. So we shouldn't have panic here. How are things in the Baltic states, which are perhaps a half step ahead of us in the reforms? Perhaps in a month or two we'll have the same picture here. Today in Tallinn, in Estonia, you can buy for currency virtually everything from needles to cars. The food stores, the state food stores and private stores are selling for rubles. The selection is lesser, but there's always bread and sausage at least. But the Minister of Economics has said that soon the state stores would have as many goods as the private stores, but after the monetary reform, which is expected in spring, the Estonian crown will have to be such that the food prices will have to be raised to world levels, but salaries are not rising, so there's a lot to buy. So Estonia is going through a sort of shock therapy. But don't worry, we're all going through a shock. Now, entrepreneurs are utilizing the opportunities which are now developing, and they don't care about borders. This is Brest. Here, a state store where there's something to buy, but what do people buy with? A foreign guest from Poland, for example, does not have any problems with